It began like any routine patrol until Ranger, the seasoned German Shepherd K9, suddenly stiffened. His ears pricked, his tail dropped, and his steady pace faltered into urgent tension. Something in the air shifted. Handler Jake glanced down, sensing the change instantly. Ranger let out a low, uneasy whine, barely audible but unmistakably a warning. Nothing around them looked unusual. Travelers bustled through the terminal, laughter echoed from food courts, and security lines moved smoothly. But Ranger knew better. His instincts, razor-sharp from years of training, were locked on something unseen. Jake tightened the leash, heart pounding. This wasn't routine anymore. As Jake and Ranger moved through the terminal, they passed cheerful travelers unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. Near Gate 14, a small boy sat alone. His knees pulled close fingers, twisting the frayed straps of his backpack. His name was Ethan, no older than 10, and his wide eyes scanned the crowd with silent desperation. Then came a man tall, sharply dressed, his smile practiced. "Your mom sent me," he said, crouching to Ethan's level with a voice as smooth as glass. "She got held up and asked me to take you to her." Ethan hesitated. The badge on the man's chest looked official. The briefcase and calm demeanor added weight to his story, but something felt off. Still, he nodded slowly and stood. That's when Ranger's bark cracked through the air like thunder. Jake barely had time to react before Ranger's growl deepened, locked onto the man, and refused to let go. Ranger's sudden change was impossible to ignore. His growl wasn't loud, but it vibrated with warning, a deep, instinctual sound that chilled Jake to the bone. The German Shepherd's eyes were locked on the man in the gray suit, and no command could break his focus. Ranger heeled Jake, ordered voice tight, but the dog stood firm, muscles coiled like a spring. The man who had claimed to be sent by Ethan's mother offered a rehearsed smile and stepped between Jake and the child. "It's fine," he said smoothly. "I'm just helping." But Ranger barked again, sharper this time, and lunged forward with a powerful yank that nearly tore the leash from Jake's hand. The terminal began to shift. Passengers slowed. Heads turned. Tension rose. Security guards moved in cautiously. Something about the man's demeanor had changed. His charm cracked, his eyes narrowed. And then, without warning, he grabbed Ethan's arm. It was a mistake. Ranger erupted into action, breaking free and launching himself at the man with explosive force. The briefcase flew. Ethan was freed, and the crowd gasped. Jake tackled the man to the floor as security swarmed. In that split second, Ranger had done what no human could. He'd sensed evil and stopped it cold. The crowd stood frozen as Ranger pinned the man to the floor, his teeth gripping the sleeve just tight enough to hold, but not harm. Jake rushed in, wrestling the man's arms behind his back as security officers poured in from every direction. Ethan stumbled backward, wide-eyed and shaking but unhurt. "He saved me," the boy whispered, clutching Ranger's fur like it was a lifeline. Around them, murmurs rippled through the terminal. Passengers who had once watched in confusion now clapped, some with tears in their eyes. The man's briefcase lay open, revealing forged documents and a fake airport badge. His calm facade crumbled as officers handcuffed him. Ranger, still alert, stood protectively over Ethan, his body tense but his job done. Jake knelt beside his partner, whispering, "Good boy. You did more than your duty today." Ranger hadn't followed protocol, but he had followed his heart, and that made all the difference. As Ranger stood tall beside Ethan, the weight of what had just occurred began to settle. Officers gathered around the man, no longer Mr. Gray, but a confirmed imposter. His fake credentials, smooth words, and rehearsed charm had masked something far more sinister: an attempted abduction. Under questioning, his story unraveled like a poorly tied knot. He had no ties to the airport, no connection to Ethan's mother, just a sickening plan thwarted by the one soul who saw past the mask. Human trafficking, one officer muttered in disbelief. Ethan sat silently nearby, still trembling, but now cradled against the warmth of a ranger's thick fur. The boy didn't say much, only clung tighter, whispering, "He knew. He knew." Jake knelt beside them, overwhelmed with emotion. Ranger hadn't just broken rank, he'd broken a cycle. He had turned instinct into action, and action into salvation. In that moment, everyone knew he wasn't just a K9, he was a guardian. Just as the adrenaline began to fade, a new wave of emotion surged through the terminal. Ethan's mother burst through the crowd, her face, pale eyes, frantic. She had been delayed at security, just as she warned, but never imagined returning to find her son nearly taken. "Ethan," she cried, collapsing to her knees as she embraced him. Tears streamed down her cheeks, her hands trembling as she clutched him tightly. Ethan wrapped his arms around her, but then turned toward Ranger. "He wouldn't let that man take me," he said softly. His mother followed his gaze and locked eyes with the K9 who had defied every command to protect a child. "Thank you," she whispered, tears falling anew. Jake stood a few steps away, resting a hand on Ranger's collar. The dog's loyalty had rewritten the rules. Disobedience had become heroism, and everyone in that terminal would remember the moment a dog chose to save a life over following orders. As the last of the crowd began to disperse, Jake remained standing beside Ranger, his hands still resting on the dog's collar. He glanced down, eyes filled with a mix of pride and awe. Ranger had disobeyed direct commands, broken protocol in a high-security environment, but in doing so, he had saved a boy's life. "I'll file the report," Jake murmured to a nearby officer, "and I'll make it clear Ranger wasn't wrong. He was ahead of us all." Around them, security worked to restore order, but the buzz in the terminal lingered. Whispers of the heroic dog who broke free to protect a child drifted through the halls. Some wiped away tears. Others simply stared in stunned silence. For Jake, the lesson was seared into his memory. Rules matter, but sometimes trusting your partner's instincts matters more. That day, Ranger wasn't just a K9 officer. He was a guardian, a hero in a uniform of fur. As the chaos faded, Ethan and his mother were led gently toward airport security for official statements. But before disappearing into the back halls, she paused, turning to glance one last time at the team who had saved her son. Her eyes landed on Ranger. With trembling lips and a heart full of gratitude, she whispered, "Thank you," her voice barely rising above the noise. Jake stood beside Ranger, the weight of the moment sinking in. The boy was safe not because of standard procedures, but because a dog had the courage to act when no one else saw the danger. Around them, passengers murmured in disbelief. Some cried, others clapped quietly. News would spread fast, but no headline could capture what truly mattered: that sometimes instinct saves what logic misses. Ranger, with ears still perked and eyes scanning protectively, had become more than a working dog. He had become the boy's guardian and a symbol of hope. Back at the gate, as Ethan clung to his mother's side, She reached down and placed a trembling hand on Ranger's head. Her voice cracked with emotion. "He saved my baby," she whispered. Jake watched in silence, his fingers resting gently on Ranger's collar, overwhelmed by the quiet power of the moment. The German Shepherd didn't move, just stood alert beside Ethan, as if still on guard. Around them, the crowd had grown. Some wiped away tears, others simply stood in awe. One child whispered to their parent, "That dog's a superhero." The truth was, Ranger had broken protocol, but in doing so, he had broken through a dangerous deception no one else could see. Jake turned to his fellow officer and said firmly, "When I write the report, I won't mark it as disobedience. I'll call it what it was, a rescue." Because on that day in that terminal, Ranger wasn't just a K9, he was a hero. As the chaos slowly gave way to calm, Jake stood beside Ranger, his partner's chest rising and falling steadily. He glanced down at the dog who had defied every command, yet had been absolutely right. Nearby, Ethan and his mother were being escorted for official statements, but before disappearing around the corner, she turned back. Her eyes met Jake's, then dropped to Ranger. "Thank you," she mouthed, her gratitude deeper than words could express. Jake felt a weight settle in his chest, not the burden of what almost happened, but the realization of what had been narrowly avoided. He knew that if Ranger had obeyed protocol, a child might have vanished forever. Sometimes the best decision, Jake murmured to himself, is made on instinct. And today, it wasn't the badge or the training that saved Ethan, it was trust. Trust in a dog who listened not to rules, but to the quiet alarm only a hero could hear. This story reminds us that true intuition should never be underestimated, especially when it comes from a loyal heart. Ranger the K9 didn't follow protocol that day. He followed something deeper: instinct, compassion, and an unwavering sense of right and wrong. For older adults who have spent a lifetime learning the value of experience and gut feeling, this story reinforces a timeless truth. Sometimes doing what's right means going beyond rules and listening to what your heart already knows. Trust and loyalty, even in silence, can be life-saving. And sometimes the quietest voice speaks the loudest truth.